This message comes from Capital One. Your business faces unique challenges and opportunities. That's why Capital One offers a comprehensive suite of financial services backed by the strength of a top 10 commercial bank. Visit CapitalOne.com/commercial. Member FDIC.
Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. All right. Anastasia, if you're ready to go, then I'll start asking you questions.
Awesome.
This is Anastasia Berg. She's a professor of philosophy at the University of California and co-author of the book, What Are Children For?
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So we are here to talk about the question all of us have to face at one point or another. Should I baby or should I brat? Which one are you, baby or brat?
A bratty baby, I would say.
Okay. I know half of you listening know exactly what me and Anastasia are talking about, and the rest of you think we're insane. The point is that many of you have asked yourself this question at some point in your life, because baby or brat is the 2024 millennial and Gen Z way of asking, should I have a baby or not? Shout out to Shannon Keating at The Cut for being the first to frame the question this way. Baby is, of course, I'm going to have a baby. And brat is, no, I'm not going to have a baby. I'm choosing to live a child-free life and all that comes with it. Brat is also the name of one of the biggest pop albums of this year by Charli XCX. She even asks this question on the album herself. Should she have a baby or be the world's biggest pop star? And while this all feels very specific to millennials,
these are actually very old questions. Should I bring more human life? Is it worth the sacrifice and trouble? We see this question raised by the ancient Greeks. We see it raised in the earliest Christian context. So thinking about what it takes to have children, thinking about bringing children, knowing that human beings are always liable to morally err. All the way up to the 19th century, we have an explosion of what today we would call the antinatalist concerns.
Now, the question may be old, but today's potential parents do face a pretty unique set of concerns around whether to procreate.
The political developments that we disapprove of, climate change, recall of reproductive rights, economic hardship, all these things we see as signs that perhaps it would be irresponsible to bring an unconsenting person into this life, and maybe it would be irresponsible vis-a-vis life on the planet.
And those concerns are creating a lot of anxiety and might be contributing to a falling birth rate. Today, Anastasia and I are going to look at two case studies that get at what's troubling millennials and Gen Zers when it comes to having kids. And they come from two world-conquering musicians who have been wrestling with this question in two of this year's blockbuster albums. Our first case study, Tyler, the Creator. Tyler, one of the biggest rappers of his generation, dropped a new album called Chromacopia. Throughout the album, there are these clips of his mother giving him advice. And towards the back half of the album, there's this moment where she's begging him for a grandchild. She says, I'm getting old and I need a grandchild, please.
And I need a grandchild, please. You know that? Just one, please. All I need is one. We need a little tie running around here, okay?
Okay, we need a little dookie booty running around here, okay. A couple songs later, Tyler, who's 33 years old, so like squarely in the age group we're discussing, he gets into why he's so hesitant to have a child. And it's all because of his dad. He has this song called Like Him. And on it, Tyler spends 4 minutes freaking out about turning out just like his absent father. And this reminds me of a lot of therapy speak we see online all the time. You know, how do I not repeat the mistakes of my parents? And for some of us, for some people, the answer is just to not have a kid, right?
Definitely. Though interestingly, we saw people say, I had a messed up childhood. I don't want to repeat that. We also saw people say, I had a really difficult childhood and I want to create a happy family. Like when I think about why I want to have kids in my life, is because I want to give them what I didn't have. And so I feel like that can go both ways. And in fact, I saw people say, I had a happy enough childhood, but I'm not sure I can do the same for my children or outdo it. Or, my sister is going to have the kids and I'm going to be a happy aunt or uncle. So the question of the family history, I think, can go either way. But what's definitely true, and I think that's something actually we don't talk about enough, is that for many of us, it doesn't take something as dramatic as a completely absent father to actually wonder, do I want to recreate the childhood and family life that I've had? And also feeling kind of helpless that I don't even know how I would do different.
Sometimes, like you said, it is something that's quite dramatic. Sometimes it's just something that has made enough of some kind of negative impact that maybe it's not completely debilitating, but you know that you don't want to repeat that or bring that forward into the next generation.
No, I think that's so true. And I think it's not just you're sort of wondering, oh, how do I not create it? You're also thinking, man, like even when it's going okay, it is so tough. I'm not sure I can do a good job of it. And I need to sacrifice maybe my career progress, maybe the quality of my relationship, my own personal growth. Maybe I can't do better. Maybe it's going to be tough for us as well. And I think that's why a lot of people are afraid to take that risk.
Okay, that is a great segue into our next case study.
That's right.
Charli XCX. So Charli XCX, she's a UK pop star who's had a huge year since she released her album Brat this past June. The album is full of club music, all about partying and being hot and having a good time.
Of course.
But then towards the back of the album, there's this one song called I Think About It All the Time. Mm-hmm. It's this little ballad where Charli, who is 31, is wrestling with whether or not she needs to stop partying, stop trying to be the biggest pop star, and have a baby.
I think about it all the time, that I might run out of time, but I finally met my baby, and a baby might be mine, 'cause maybe one day I might, if I don't run out of time, would it make me miss all my freedom? Think about it all the time.
Time being, of course, this imagined biological clock that, fully runs out, and Charli quite literally cannot have a child. And she's dealing with this tension between what life she wants to have for herself as a career woman versus a mother. And she's feeling deeply, deeply pressured by this biological clock.
So I think in addition to the fact there are a lot of very positive developments that do allow women and men to have more flexibility in terms of whether or not to have children, whether they're going to have the children. We also see something I sometimes call the kind of self-evidence of a logic of infinite postponement. I've heard from women who will talk about even in their early, well until kind of edging the mid-30s, hearing even from their doctors, like, you don't have to worry about this yet. And we certainly say that to each other. You don't have to worry about it. I think sometimes it can underserve us. It can underserve us not because everyone needs to have their kids young, but the fact we're taking for granted that the latest we have children, the better. I'm not sure that's always the best strategy. And I actually think it's a bit refreshing that somebody like Charli XCX or Tyler, the Creator, who are younger, are comfortable in expressing the fact that they are thinking about this question, that it's alive for them. Because what happens is, it's not that people are, as we were talking, dating with a view to family and then decide, okay, now I'm in the relationship, everything is lined up, now I'm ready to have them. What happens is they're not even thinking about kids. And so then what happens is that there comes a moment when they think, I can't postpone thinking about it anymore. And then there's panic, especially on the side of women who are more limited biologically in terms of kind of extending their timelines indefinitely. And so one of the things I would like to see is people being comfortable not having the kids younger. I don't care when you have your kids. But I do care that people are given the opportunity, and I think actually this is like a feminist goal, is that women are given the opportunity and the knowledge that they need in order to make these decisions about how to date and how to live and how to plan out their lives when it matters most. And again, so not to have that decision being made for people as opposed to by the people themselves.
I also wonder about this. I mean, it's interesting that you say that it's refreshing for someone like Charli XCX to bring up these questions. And I do think that there is something that is refreshing and really interesting about raising this question in the middle of an album of like club bangers.
Yes.
I think what it shows is that there are many people who maybe they don't seem like they're thinking about it all the time. When Charli XCX is talking about using illicit substances in the bathroom at the club, you're not necessarily thinking about that as the person who's considering like, maybe I should have a baby. But very often people are thinking about those two things together. But I would still argue that we live in an aggressively natalist culture where the expectation is that women will have or want children. And so while I think, like you said, that I think it is a refreshing artistic choice, I bristle at the idea.
Yes, I can tell you're bristling.
Well, yeah, I bristle at the idea that most people are not already thinking about these things. Is Charli XCX's question really that transgressive if we already live in a society that already assumes that women are going to be asking themselves these questions all the time anyway? I mean, at least 4 or 5 times a year I get a cab driver who asks me why, not if I have any children, but why I don't have any. It's a big cultural expectation that women have children. And so I guess, I don't know. I just don't think it's transgressive that this question is being asked by a 32-year-old woman. It is interesting artistically, but I don't know if it's barrier breaking.
Yeah, I think we live in a society that's both pro-natalist and anti-natalist. And I think it's important to notice that. So we've heard from women, especially ones, so I'm going to qualify it, especially ones who are in, can call it like avant-garde professions or disciplines. So academics, people in the media, people in the arts. And they'll say, pressure to have kids. I felt pressure not to have kids.
Certainly.
I felt pressure from parents, certainly from colleagues. It was frowned upon when I was thinking about it, when I had them, etc.
Sure. I mean, I've had friends who were told offhand by employers that they wouldn't have been hired if they had kids, which for the record is illegal, but career pressure can certainly be a factor.
Yeah. So we have, I think, very loud and very strong pressures coming from different directions. Let me give another example. So one thing we look at is film and television. And we find that after years where women played the role of second fiddle, they were wives and mothers and secretaries, we have them now taking center stage, the protagonists of shows and films. It is remarkable how often they are a protagonist, but how rarely they are a mother. So from the stoners of Broad City to the spies of Homeland to the kind of political operatives of Scandal and House of Cards, they're very rarely mothers. So again, somebody attuned to that messaging will say, well, the message is you could be anything you want to be, lady, as long as you're deprioritizing motherhood. I think both things are happening at the same time. I think your cab driver is asking questions he should not. But I also think that we are seeing fewer and fewer representations of how you can combine motherhood with a truly fulfilling and intellectually and artistic and professionally really ambitious life.
You do raise a good point in that becoming a mother does represent what we have referred to in preparing for this conversation as like a cultural death, as you point out.
100%.
You can be a mother, but you can't be the star of the show. You can be a mother, but you can't be the protagonist. Or if you are a mother and the protagonist, then being a mother is the focus of your life as opposed to having both your personhood and your children's personhood both moving along together forward in time. One band, one sound. Usually the mother identity is prioritized. I absolutely see that. And I'll say, I think looking across at the rest of pop culture, there's like this alternative that when looking at like perhaps mega famous, very rich, very wealthy women like say Beyonce or Rihanna or the Kardashians, where these are people whose careers have only gotten bigger after they've had children. But in some ways it could be said that's because they've capitalized off of the image of their motherhood, even though their lived experience of motherhood is probably very, very different
Indeed.
than yours is or how mine might be or the average person. Yeah, but here's the thing. This question, to have a baby or not to have a baby
Yeah.
is a binary. There is or there is not a child. You know, you have a life before and a life after. But I don't know. I think that this kind of thinking is reductive.
I agree with you.
Instead of to have or to not have a baby, what's a better question that would help us understand what we want from life?
I love that. I completely agree with you. And I think that this kind of binary, which is not just a grasp of the question as a binary one, but it's also this binary that we have in identities, that we see people kind of doubling down on the identity of those with kids and the childless. I think these are underserving us. I think the question I would like to have people ask is, do I want to take part in, sometimes I call it a little facetiously, team humanity? Do I think we deserve a future and a good one? And if so, only then, and if the answer is yes, then I can ask, how are you going to do it? Are you going to do it by having biological children? Maybe you're going to be a parent, but these aren't your biological children. Maybe you're going to be a great aunt. Maybe you're going to be a godparent. Maybe you're going to be a teacher. Maybe you're going to be a politician that secures the right kind of conditions so people can raise their families in comfort and dignity. Maybe you're going to be an artist who creates an artistic legacy that's going to enrich our lives and that we can hand down to future generations. Maybe you're going to be an amazing interviewer and you're going to help people think through the way they want to shape their own lives and the lives of others. So there are a lot of ways, I think, of contributing to that robust, flourishing, better human future. I don't think having children is the only way. I don't think having children is the best way. It is fundamental. If we want to have an artistic, intellectual legacy to give to the future generations, we probably need future generations. But it's something that people don't necessarily always know how to think about in ways that can help them reach a place where they're happy with whatever they decide.
Well, Anastasia, thank you so much for coming on and talking with me about how people are wrestling with these questions of pop culture. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
That was Anastasia Berg. She's the co-author of a new book called What Are Children For? Coming up, TikTok's favorite food critic, Keith Lee, and how the lines between critic and influencer are being blurred.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Sattva. Founder and CEO Ron Rutson shares the story of how he got started creating Sattva.
In 2007, 2008, I went out and I bought the most popular luxury mattresses. I tore them apart and I realized, based on the raw materials cost and the analysis that I had done, that I was able to sell that level mattress, but with a very affordable price.
To learn more, go to SAATVA.com/NPR.
This message comes from BetterHelp. It's important to take time to show gratitude towards others, but it's equally important to thank yourself. Life throws a lot of curveballs, and being grateful isn't always easy. Therapy can help remind you of all that you're worthy of and all that you do have. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Try at BetterHelp.com/NPR today to get 10% off your first month.
This message comes from our sponsor, Grainger. This is the story of the one. As a maintenance engineer, he hears things differently. To the untrained ear, everything on his shop floor might sound fine, but he can hear gears grinding or a belt slipping. So he steps in to fix the problem at hand before it gets out of hand. And he knows Grainger's got the right product he needs to get the job done, which is music to his ears. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
When you picture how the restaurant industry is depicted in pop culture, what do you see? Well, you might see the kitchen crew from The Bear on FX.
Yes, chef.
Dripping in sweat over painstakingly assembled plates of gourmet food. Maybe you see a fancy group of diners in a shishi restaurant on a remote Scandinavian island, like something out of the menu.
That's what makes his food so exciting. He's not just a chef, he's a storyteller.
You may even picture the difficult-to-please Anton Ego, the prim and grim French food critic from Disney's Ratatouille.
I will return tomorrow night with high expectations. Pray you don't disappoint me.
Whatever you picture, it's probably a far cry from how most of us eat. Even some of your favorite food writers. What was the last thing you ate in your car?
I will say, I feel like I've been doing a lot of eating in my car these days. I'm 9 months pregnant, and so I do a lot of eating.
I remember this because we hit a deer soon after.
Oh, no.
A sausage, egg, and cheese sandwich.
Was the sandwich good?
It was great. It was really good.
Well, at least something positive came out of it. That was Lindsay C. Green, James Beard Award-winning restaurant critic for the Detroit Free Press and New York Times food writer Portia Wilson. And before you judge them for eating in their cars, look in the mirror. Turns out just over half of Americans regularly eat in their cars, which makes a lot of us no different than TikTok superstar Keith Lee, the former MMA fighter who now might be America's hottest restaurant critic.
Me and my family are in Houston, Texas. Me and my family were driving around Chicago looking for food to eat. Me and my wife were driving around Vegas looking for places to eat. I'm in Orlando, Florida, and I'm at this place called the World Food Truck Market. I got it, let's try it, and rate it 1 through 10.
He's gained over 16 million followers on TikTok, getting takeout from local mom and pop restaurants around the country and rating each meal on a scale of 1 to 10. And when he really loves a spot, he'll tip big money to the restaurant owners. Since his food reviews began blowing up, Keith has scored lucrative sponsorships with brands like DoorDash and Wingstop, partnered with celebrities like Mr. Beast and Cardi B.
We're going to tell you the truth.
I got it, let's try it, and rate 1 to 10.
And was even lampooned on SNL.
Okay, so today I am trying the Hennessy Habanero Fruity Pebble Chicken Sandwich from Lisa's Soul Food.
But his success has not come without controversy, as Keith has taken his reviews outside of his former home base of Las Vegas and moved on to critiquing the food scenes of New York, Atlanta, D.C., and other big cities. It got personal.
It's an age-old debate here in the DMV. Does this region have a good food scene? TikTok influencer Keith Lee says no.
And some viewers have been downright upset when Keith doesn't love their favorite food city.
I feel like it's not also fair to assume that DC is just a place for like chicken wings and mambo sauce.
And as Keith often seeks out hot wings, burgers, and pizza wherever he goes, some viewers have been frustrated by what they see as a lack of effort or research on Keith's part to understand the unique food cultures of the cities he visits. Something a good critic would probably do. Keith Lee shows no signs of slowing down. And as more people turn to him for advice on what to eat, it got me wondering, what do we gain and what do we lose when influencers become critics? That's exactly what Portia, Lindsay, and I are getting into today. Portia, I want to start with you. You wrote an article at the New York Times on Keith Lee's rise to fame and the controversy his reviews have not only created online, but even amongst some of his Black food media peers, calling into question the limits of social media and food criticism. I kind of want to take a step back, though, because I think that many of us are familiar with hearing about food critics, but I don't know if everybody knows exactly what a food critic does. So let's kind of start off by defining some terms. What is the function of a food critic, and in what ways does Keith Lee operate like one?
When I think of food criticism, I think of the main function as service journalism. You're telling readers where they should be spending their money, what places to go to, but you're also, in the context of a review, talking about the history of a certain neighborhood, a certain city. There's so much that goes into a good review.
Particularly for me, being here in Detroit, I think part of the context that I like to give is even just the sense of place. The neighborhood that a new restaurant has opened up in is really important, especially for a city that's quickly gentrifying. I think when we look at what Keith Lee does, that piece might not be there, but I think he also is offering a sort of service journalism as well.
Portia, in your piece about Keith Lee, you also mentioned a few things that he does to try to be fair or to try to give a proper assessment in his reviews. Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Because of how successful he is and how popular he is, there is this attempt at anonymity.
Right. Keith Lee has become so popular that he's now sending in his crew incognito to avoid getting special treatment.
Most of the time, I don't even order my own food. I either have my wife do it or my sister do it. Mainly because the way I think about it, I don't want special treatment based on how many followers I got.
What some food critics do to make sure they get an accurate representation of the food and service of a given restaurant.
Yeah, where it differs is that, you're popping into a restaurant once, giving it 1 or 2 bites, and then giving it a review, most critics will visit at least 3 times to try to get a taste of like everything on the menu and get a more like equal sort of sense of, you know, what this restaurant does really well, what it might not do so well. Seeing him like navigate the line between influencer and critic is really fascinating. There's stuff like sending in the entourage, but then there's things like coming in and taking pictures with diners and chefs and leaving wads of cash that are very out of line with that.
It is interesting to see him straddle this line between critic and influencer, but also like celebrity too. I mean, obviously his videos have become very popular and he travels the country visiting different cities, but he doesn't really do a lot of deep research. And that was even a sore spot for previous tours. For example, on a trip to New York City, he ate a salmon chopped cheese sandwich, which as someone who lives in New York, that honestly left me speechless. And he got so much pushback that a New York-based food influencer named Righteous Eats stepped in to actually help him.
Righteous Eats have been getting tagged nonstop since Keith arrived in New York City. But I was still surprised when he hollered at me at midnight on Friday evening via DMs.
He kind of tries restaurants based upon recommendations that he gets in the comments. And the results are very, very mixed at best. It's not like he's necessarily contributing to like the food or culinary scene of a given city. But I do think, though, that he is filling some kind of void within food criticism. He's a Black man who feels like somebody that I could know or be related to, who's trying lots of accessible foods from small businesses, mom and pop spots. Those tend to be the kinds of restaurants that he's going for.
I think I might disagree a little in that I think that he is in some way sort of shifting like the culinary ecology, like you mentioned, because I think that he is calling attention to some of these restaurants that aren't covered by someone like me, you know, who aren't being covered in the local papers or magazines, you know, shiny media. And so I think in a way that makes a huge difference and really does change things for consumers of his content, but also consumers of the culinary economy, right? And I think that what he does is work that really does help local restaurant scenes in a great way. It's for the restaurant owners, these, you know, small business owners that tend to be mom and pop, that tend to be Black owned, minority owned, BIPOC in general for the most part.
As this is a job that does have a lot of responsibility with it when you break it down like that, I have also noticed that definitely brings out some folks who kind of feel frustrated with like the rise of the sort of influencer critic.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Rosetta Stone, the perfect app to achieve your language learning goals no matter how busy your schedule gets. It's designed to maximize study time with immersive 10-minute lessons and audio practice for your commute. Plus, tailor your learning plan for specific objectives like travel. Get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership for 50% off and unlimited access to 25 language courses. Learn more at rosettastone.com/NPR.
This message comes from Capital One, offering commercial solutions you can bank on. Now more than ever, your business faces unique challenges and opportunities. That's why Capital One offers a comprehensive suite of financial services, all tailored to your short and long-term goals. Backed by the strength and stability of a top 10 commercial bank, their dedicated experts work with you to build lasting success. Explore the possibilities at CapitalOne.com/commercial, a member FDIC.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from Montblanc, cherished by authors, creatives, everyday writers, and all those who want to leave their mark. The iconic Meisterstück, or masterpiece writing instrument, has been instrumental in capturing stories for over 100 years. Montblanc inspires you to write and leave your mark. Now, let's write.
This message comes from Sun and Ski Sports. Soccer at 6, football at 7, leave work at 5, but dinner? Who knows? And don't forget the weekend tournament madness. At Sun and Ski Sports, they've got the gear to help parents survive and maybe even enjoy it. Comfy Viore activewear, Hocus, and Rumple blankets for the perfect sideline setup. Don't miss capturing those game-winning moments with a GoPro. This sports season, Sun and Ski Sports has everything you need to keep it together, sort of.
Keith Lee is a food influencer who doesn't have the same experience or credentials as some Black folks who have been reviewing food or restaurants or in food media for a long time. And some people see that as kind of a hard pill to swallow. What do you think of that?
I think when you look at social media food criticism, what I could understand is some of these social media critics are paid to do these reviews, who are contracted by these restaurants and also put out reviews on food that they've gotten for free, food that they're photographing in the best light, really rolled out the red carpets to come in and paint these restaurants in a good light. And so I think that smoke and mirrors of social media can be dangerous when you're talking about criticism or when you're calling it criticism, because that's not really what it is. It's marketing. And so I think that line gets blurred and that can be dangerous, but that's not really what Keith Lee is doing. I come from the beauty industry, and I remember that same energy towards the blogger. You know, it was that same eye roll. Who is this? I think history repeats itself in a lot of ways, and not surprised that some people would have some animosity, but I think there's a lot of ways to look at it.
One of the things I've been thinking about with this, I can't understand where some people might take issue with not just Keith Lee's rise, also his ubiquity. He's everywhere at once. But I get the sense that Keith Lee is not like the actual problem, but more discrimination and lack of diversity within food media in general. And also like a tendency when one Black person becomes like a rocket ship success, then that's the person whose name is on everyone's lips. Instead of thinking, oh, well, Keith Lee's tapped into an audience, this might be a place to explore. Maybe there are other people, other voices that we could bring in. A lot of times the thought, I think, becomes in food media, let's talk to let's just keep calling the same person back over and over and over and over again. And that's not Keith Lee's fault.
Yeah, that happens in the food world so much. And it's like, that becomes a problem for so many reasons. Like, then you're making someone a token, but also when you're talking about Black foodways, and there's so much like regionality and diversity within the Black experience. And yeah, it becomes one person speaking for everyone, which is super problematic. The influencer thing that Lindsay was talking about is so true. It's an entire economy where you see these videos on TikTok of people, with the great lighting coming in. And on the media side, you can kind of tell when you're watching a video that somebody was encouraged to come in at a certain time on a certain night and have the best table. But it's not Keith Lee's fault that this is the economy that I don't even want to say is operating in. He's doing his own thing.
I will say, though, some of my favorite people to follow food-wise, that's not even their full-time job. I just trust their judgment because they share so thoughtfully about food. But we are also seeing a disinvestment in journalism, a disinvestment in staff jobs. And I think that has affected our cultural literacy and cultural fluency in this country. Do you think that there's a world where, even outside of food, we have a lot of loud, popular influencers and few real critics? And I don't say real to mean like necessarily they are staffed at a, newspaper or something like that, because those are difficult jobs to get. They're rare these days, but more so that they are somebody who applies rigor to their critique. And do you think we could be moving in that direction? Do we see that world in our future?
Ooh, I was about to say something controversial.
Oh, please say something controversial.
If food criticism dies off, it will be food criticism's fault. The genre is a piece of cultural criticism that has taken too long to meet the times and the demands of the consumer. This is the result of decades and decades and decades of the same type of person being hired over and over and over again to determine what the tastes are, what places are good. It's changing now, or it's different now, but that was the norm for far too long. And so if it goes extinct, I think it is the genre's fault.
I like that controversial take.
I 100% agree. I think the other thing that I would just add is that what's nice about the way that the scene has evolved is that we have the Korshas. We have a lot more food writers who are able to write stories about Keith Lee and about cultural criticism. I feel like there's more diversity in food coverage when we have food writers, food beat writers who can write about multiple things. But I also think that if we phased out the critic's position, not even just in food criticism, but in criticism overall, because it is sort of a dying field, we would never get the perspective of someone like me, of a person of color, a woman. You know, I think it's been a largely white male dominated position. And so we've only gotten one perspective for a really long time. And to Korsha's point, it would be the fault of the hiring managers who make that perspective, you know, that Eurocentric perspective, the North Star or the gold standard. Then what we're saying is that no other taste preference, no other palate, no other person can tell you what tastes good or where to go to eat or what is great about the food scene in your city. And I think that that would make us a really ignorant people. Like, I think that we would be worse off as diners, as eaters, if we were only able to see food through the lens of one demographic. I just think we would be doing a disservice to our readers.
Well, Korsha, Lindsay, I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you both so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. This was great.
Thank you. It was so fun.
That was Korsha Wilson, food writer to the New York Times, and Lindsay Green from the Detroit Free Press. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Barton Girdwood,
Alexis Williams,
Liam McBain,
Corey Antonio Rose.
Engineering support came from
Patrick Murray.
Our executive producer is
Jasmine Romero.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Merrill. Whatever your financial goals are, you want a straightforward path there. But the real world doesn't usually work that way. Merrill understands that. That's why, with a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalized plan and a clear path forward. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer, registered investment advisor, member SIPC. This message comes from NPR sponsor Shopify, the global commerce platform that helps you sell and show up exactly the way you want to. Customize your online store to your style. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/NPR.
This message comes from Jackson. Seek clarity in retirement planning at Jackson.com. Jackson is short for Jackson Financial Inc., Jackson National Life Insurance Company, Lansing, Michigan, and Jackson National Life Insurance Company of New York, Purchase, New York.